Hey everyone, welcome back to the Elena Agar Podcast. Today's episode is an inspiring ride with Mike Calvo, dad, husband, entrepreneur, and all-around resilient human. From DJing in Miami's hottest clubs to creating cutting-edge tech for the visually impaired, Mike's journey is nothing short of incredible. I find him inspiring. I find him somebody who's doing real great positive impact on the world, and I hope you find the same. Check it out, and as always, subscribe, share, and let me know what you think. Mike, welcome to the Shift Podcast.
Hi,
I'm excited to chat with you today.
as am I.
It's always exciting to me when other people introduce me to cool people like you. So I'm really excited to dive into your story. Part of kind of when you and I connected initially and we just got to talking and I was like, I have to stop you. Save this for the podcast. We got to talk about this on a podcast because it usually got real good. And I was like, nope. I was like, we're going to save this for the podcast. So I had to stop you so we can have an authentic conversation on the podcast and my audience can learn with me about your story and kind of the work that you're doing out there and the impact you wanted to make. So for people who are listening to this, as they walk away from this conversation, what are some things you're hoping that they walk away with knowing about you or about the work that you do?
If if you remember anything from this conversation is that never say I can't. I can't. I tried and it didn't work. It might take me a minute or whatever. That's one thing. But I can't. That's just not. It shouldn't be in our vocabulary. If you can dream it, you can do it, and that's not some BS platitude. That's just the way I truly feel about
Mm.
our ability as humans to conceive of something, whatever it is, and then to do it. If given enough time and resources, I think anything is possible.
And where did you get that mindset from?
I had no other choice. you
Tell
know,
me more.
well, so the challenge, so I don't know if it's visually possible to see, but I am totally blind. And as a totally blind person growing up, it's a challenge. I grew up in a city, I grew up in Miami, Florida. I am the child of Cuban immigrants. They came to the United States in the 60s. And so my parents didn't have language. I was born at a time where if it wasn't social bias towards certain immigrant groups, it was ignorance towards the capacity or capabilities of a person with a disability, whether it be visual impairment or whatever. I grew up in a pretty backward ass time. I mean, I'm sorry to be so brutally honest about it, but
Mm.
it was challenging.
Yeah.
And the reason I bring that up isn't for people to say, oh, poor guy. It's just to understand that when you face so much adversity, so many people telling you can't, and
Mm.
even well-meaning people, right? Like when I was 12, 13, I would say, well, I want to do this or I want to do that, and be like, oh, Mikey, come on, you need to be
Mm.
realistic. You need to understand that you're blind, and you don't do that, man. You just don't do
Mm.
that. Don't do that to a kid. If a kid tells you he wants to be an astronaut and a nurse and and a police officer and whatever, let them
Mm-hmm.
do it.
Yeah,
Let them
let them
dream.
dream. Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, even though, like I said, I ran into folks that very well-meaning as I grew up as well.
Mm-hmm.
But they didn't understand that words are seeds. Life and death is in the power of the tongue. I mean, if we say it, and it's going to be,
Mm.
and if you tell someone long enough you can't, you know what, they're going to believe that. So and it's not only what people tell you, but it's what you tell yourself. What do you tell yourself? Because you're the one that has to go to sleep with you at night. You're the one that has to lay there and think about whatever it is you think about before you go to bed. And if you're thinking, man, I can't do this, and I've got this problem, and all you're doing is playing tapes of people telling you what you can't do, then you know what? You're not going to do it, or
Mm.
it's going to seem so overwhelming and so daunting. I trained blind people for years, Elena, and you know what? One of the biggest thing that I found about training blind people
Mm.
was that training blind people isn't just about training a person whose eyes don't work, how to
Mhm.
navigate a world, how to consume content, whether it be, using a computer or using a mobile device or using braille or large print. It's also about self-esteem. It's
Yeah.
also about, hey, what do you think of yourself? Do you believe you can? It's also about going to their support system, whether it be their parents or their guardian or their children in the case of older blind folks,
Mhm.
and saying, "Hey, give them some wings, give them some rope, let
Yeah.
them fly." Because if not, then what you've got is you've got a dependent human.
Mhm.
And that's not what we want. We want interdependence. We want independence. We don't want codependence, right?
Correct. Yeah. Let me take me back before we go into further into this, like the no excuses mindset, which I very much appreciate. Take me back to childhood. Take me back to kind of growing up, and just tell me that story. And then how did you come to being who you are today and doing what you're doing?
So as I said, I grew up. I'm a child of immigrant parents. I went to. I got my training as a blind person at Michigan School for the Blind way back when.
Mm.
And when you're a little blind kid, they teach you so many cool things. Like by the time you're 4 or 5, you know how to make your bed, you know how to wash clothes, you know a lot of independent living skills. You know your way. I mean, you don't know everything about the kitchen, right? But you
Mhm.
know your way around. You know your way around it. And so I got a lot of that training early. And then, because it was freaking cold in Michigan, my parents, being the good Cubans that they are, they decided to go to, Cuba in America, which was Miami, you know,
Mhm. Yeah.
and that's where we went. And so I arrived in Miami. And when I arrived in Miami, I got what was called mainstreamed, which mainstreamed means that you are part of the day you're in a class with children that have, the same disability as you do, with blind kids or whatever, in my case, blind and what they call low vision. And there are differences. A blind person is totally blind like me. Now, blind, it's kind of like Latino, right? In Latino, you've got separate groups. You've got South Americans, Central Americans, you've got Caribbeans, and then you've got Cubans, and you've got Nicaraguans, and you've got Venezuelans and Colombians. And so blindness is kind of that all encompass. We're all blind, right?
Mhm.
Whether we're quote unquote legally blind or blind.
Mhm.
Low vision is a person who can see some stuff, but
Mhm.
can't see everything. There's
Mhm.
anything 2200 and below, I think, or something like that.
Mhm.
It's 2200 with corrective, so with glasses or whatever.
Mhm.
And that's an important thing because right now, as we record this, there is such a huge debate about, should we use the B word? Should we use that word blind? Shh,
Mhm.
blind. That's
Yeah.
me. I'm good. So anyway, so I digress. But
Yeah.
um, but growing up a blind kid, I went into the mainstream. I'll never forget. I had the most awesome teacher named Mrs. Baldwin, who was in my second grade, and she had this long hair. And understand, I'm not being like crude. I'm just saying,
Mhm.
as a blind kid, it's all about touch and feel and smell.
Mhm.
And she was just like the nicest teacher, such a sweet teacher, and she loved on the kids, and she was just a wonderful person and very encouraging. Mike, you can do anything, and a very nurturing human being.
Mhm.
Um, and unfortunately, that's not the way it continued going forward. But I started there, and I went through, and um, let's just say that my parents did not have the skills to advocate for me as a child.
Mhm.
Um, Not because I'm sure they didn't have the desire, but there's a couple of things that are working against you. One of them, of course, are stereotypes and the biases that you have from your culture.
Mhm.
In Cuba, where my parents are from, blind people didn't amount to much.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, and I tell people because I did a great deal of work in Cuba. In fact, I met my wife in Cuba, my current wife in Cuba, and that was while I was working and studying the Cuban system, because we can say whatever we want. about the revolution in Cuba, and we can, debate and argue and wax philosophical about this versus that system. But the reality is that people with disabilities in Cuba benefited from that thing called the revolution. And that has nothing to do with politics. It's just a fact. The United States and other developed countries like it have over 85% unemployment rate amongst the blind.
Wow.
I just saw something on television the other day where people were wigging out because we're at 4.3 unemployment. Oh my
Yeah.
God, we're losing. Oh my God, the
Yeah.
stock market, it's going through the floor. When we've got 4.3, really? Are you kidding me?
Mm.
And
So
I have
much
to deal with,
talent lost. Sorry
yeah,
to interrupt. So much
85.
talent.
Yeah, 85% of unemployment amongst people like me. I
Mm.
know Harvard graduates, Elena. Harvard graduates can't get a freaking job
Mm. Mm.
because of society's ignorance. So in this, in the Cuban system, everybody can get a job.
Mhm.
Everybody that wants an education can get one.
Mhm.
Obviously, because of the political system, and again, we're not going to go into that.
Uh-huh.
But and there are many things about that system that are frustrating to me as an American.
Mhm.
But the reality is, you got to give these, as they say, you got to give the devil his due. And I experienced when I was in, so here in the United States, for example, right?
Mhm.
I'll be walking down the street and I'll be standing at the edge of a crosswalk, right? Getting ready to
Mhm.
stop, going across the street. Now I'll walk up and I will be ready to walk, and some very well meaning person, I'll start walking and they'll either grab me and say, "Stop!" And they'll put their hands on me,
Mhm.
or they'll just grab me and drag me across the street because, they know where I'm going. I just
Yeah.
dropped out of thin air. you know
Yeah.
and my question to him is, how the hell do you think I got here, dude? I just did I drop out of thin air? No, I walked here from home, or I walked out of the gym and I came here, and I'm gonna go have a coffee at Starbucks. Leave me alone. Get your hands
Yeah.
off of me. On the other hand, I was just trying to help. Okay. So the one thing, and this is part of my kind of my talking thing, one of my talking points is, okay, when you meet a person with a disability, I understand that we were all taught as little boys and girls to be empathetic.
Mhm.
And empathy is truly important. I mean it. It's
Mhm.
important. But more important is dialogue.
Mm. Yeah.
More important is interaction. So, what can I do for you? Do you need help? I see you're standing here and you got a cane in your hand. So, obviously, you're a blind guy. Yeah, that's me.
Mhm.
I identify as a blind guy. Okay, so do you need any help crossing the street? It looks like a busy street. You got 4 lanes of traffic. No, you hear how the traffic light there is beeping? Yeah. Well, that's what gives me the clues. Now, if you're walking, you want to walk next to me, just in case some idiot doesn't pay attention to the red light and
Yeah.
is coming in my way. You could throw me on the floor or something, or throw me out of the way, or drag me wherever you're going. That's cool. But
Yeah.
from a blindness perspective, no, I'm good. But thank you for asking.
Mm.
That's not empathy. It's truly communication. Why? Because you never ask a lady her age, so I'm not going to ask you yours, but I'm 56. And I've been doing this for 56 years, Elena. You know
Mhm.
what I'm saying? I've been
Yeah.
doing this for a long time.
Yeah.
So there is no possible way that you could look at me and say, well, if I was blind, I wouldn't be able to do whatever it is. So
Yeah.
naturally, he couldn't do it.
Yeah.
You
It's
see
a
where empathy
reflection.
doesn't
It's
work?
like, yeah, it's like a reflection of like our own thing, right? Is that what you're trying to get? Like
Well,
it's
yeah, but that's what empathy is to a certain degree. I
yeah.
mean, and that
Yeah.
makes
Yeah. True.
sense. I mean,
Yeah.
you see somebody who's hungry, who
Mhm.
hasn't eaten or whatever. You're like, dude, man, I got to give that person, $5, or I got to do so. I got to buy them a meal, or you
Yeah.
see a family. If you were down on your luck one day, and you see a family that was down on their luck, and you say, man, let me go buy them let me give them $100 gift card to Walmart, or let me do
Mhm.
whatever,
Mhm.
because we empathize, and I get it, but that's not the way to deal with a person with a disability,
Yeah.
because we're people. And you know what? I got 5 kids. I got
Yeah.
2 ex-wives. I've got the American dream. You know?
I
So
love
it's
it.
like, I got BS in my life like anybody else does. I got
Yeah.
drama. People get pissed off at me like everybody else. I argue with people just like anybody else. There's there you know and that brings me to you know the point where I say, okay, what when I went to Cuba,
Mhm.
instead I go to Cuba and I'd be like, "Hey, I'm looking for, so and so restaurant." And they'll be like, "Oh, okay. Walk down the street. You hear the cars down there at the end. Yeah, okay. Make a left over there. When you hear you hear whatever, a sound, right there. That's going to be the restaurant. You'll hear it from across the street. When you don't hear the cars coming, go ahead and cross the street, and you'll be there. You
Mhm.
need my help? No, you sure? Yeah, I'm good. Okay, see you later. Bye. And that's it.
Yeah.
Nobody's dragging me anywhere. Nobody's offended because I said I got this.
Mhm.
Nobody's offended because they were just trying to help, or whatever. Because I've I started a technology company in 2000,
Mhm.
right? I felt that technology was a great equalizer. I'm a nerd,
Mhm.
you know so I felt, hey, if I could develop, or I can create, or I can lead a team to develop technology, then dude, we got this. We're going to beat the crap out of this. This is the problem. The world's been waiting for me to fix this problem.
Yeah.
But no, 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 the unemployment rate was still 85% then, and it's 85% now.
That is
and
just mind-blowing to me.
and blind people have more technology. And I mean, and listen, folks, I get it. There's a lot of other disabilities, but blind's my thing.
Yeah.
so so
We're
and
talking about blindness today.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah. But um there is, well, because if we want to be inclusive, but in this particular case, I'm going to be just about me, about us. But I mean, really, you know, if technology were the great equalizer, while we haven't arrived as a community, I can walk into anybody's store and buy electronics off the shelf. If you had a problem with your cell phone tomorrow, Elena,
Mhm.
and I don't know how proficient you are with it, but if you had a problem, you could hand it to me and say, "Mikey, fix this for me, please."
Mhm.
And I just hit a couple of keys, and now I can fix your phone for you.
Mm.
You see what I'm saying? A lot of people don't know that.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't understand that technology is part of the great equalizer, but the bigger equalizer is communication, it's dialogue, it's social understanding. And that's why when I went to this little island of my heritage, and I realized, wow, these people look at me as a person,
Mm.
as another individual. It just filled me with so much joy. And I know all of the trouble. I mean, I'm not that blind. I know
Mhm.
the trouble that folks from that country deal with.
Yeah.
My wife tells me about it all the time. We support her family over there. We do a lot of
Mhm.
things like that. But there is a social chasm
Mhm.
of understanding between what first world thinking about what the capabilities of a person with a disability, in my particular case blindness, can do, and
Mm.
is capable of, and is eligible to do, than a developing country, which is very interesting to me.
Yeah.
So
I
um
wonder why that is. Have you given a thought? Like, why? I'm, as you're talking about this, I wonder if it's just because there's a lot of um also although there's a, like, I'm from Russia, as we were chatting before we started recording, right? And so in Russia we don't have a lot of support for people with disabilities, similar to Cuba, in the sense of, like, if you have a disability, almost like, you're not going to mount up too much, like that's just the mentality, right? But it's in Cuba, I'm surprised to hear that people actually, they kind of just, they treat you like anybody else. In Russia, I wonder if that's the case, but I wonder if it's in the US, is because there's so much, what's the word I'm looking for, like, there's so many rules and policies and laws around that almost people are kind of afraid, maybe. So it's like they bringing too much attention to the topic versus just treating people equally. Do you know what I'm
I
saying?
think I think that you've got something there. I mean, I can be cynical, and
Yeah.
say it's easier to give a blind person a keep your ass at home check,
Mm.
from, be it social security, be it welfare, be it whatever. And unfortunately, I'm American. I have the right to say what I please. And
Mhm.
that's unfortunately what has happened to many cultures in this country, where we get enough to survive but never live.
Right, right.
And that's the case. I mean, I take, I take a medication that, thank God I have insurance, knock on wood,
Mhm.
that covers it, and it's for sleep deprivation, right? Because blind people, we don't have circadian rhythms. So we
Mm.
don't know when it's dark. Our bodies don't know when it's dark, because
Mm.
circadian rhythms, your eyes, the light that you see is like the photosynthesis to a plant, right? So there's
Mhm.
a very expensive drug that is like $24,000 a month. I
Wow.
kid you not. And
Mm.
I have it, I get it. And I'm like, okay, what happens with the person who's on SSI, on Social Security income,
Yeah.
that gets $900 a month and can take this medication, and gets this medication, which is $24,000? Dude, I'll bet you that person would
Uh,
trade at least three of those pills
yeah.
for a better life.
Yeah.
So the system's screwed up. The system needs a reorganization, not just the cost of drugs and stuff. I mean, that's a big debate in itself, but just the whole thing of, yes, we can. We
Mm.
can. And one of the big equalizers for us, though, as a community, I used to joke around with people when I started my first company on the internet in 2000, was, well, now blind people, because before, there could be 15 different blind people in a room, but we didn't see each other. So we didn't know we were there. you know Now on the internet we can find each other,
Yeah.
and there's been such a huge community developed across over the internet. And because of that, there have been entrepreneurs like myself that have brought down the costs of technology
Mm.
by aligning ourselves with really genius people. But I get ahead of myself because we were talking about being a kid.
Mhm, that's
And
okay.
but I grew up in Miami. um 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade was cool, 6th grade, and all through this, the sleep deprivation was getting me. I didn't know it back then. It's
Mm.
called non-24. If you're a Googler, Google it, non-24.
Mhm.
And but so I would fall asleep in class. So every once in a while I get that teacher that would tell me that you're going to be like a loser. You're blind and you're not going to, yeah, and you fall asleep in class and you don't, wow, you're never going to amount to jack stuff,
Yeah.
you
Mhm.
know. Wow. So when I was about 12 years old, I as many blind people, we love the radio.
Mhm.
We love to get, we love music and the
Mm.
radio. So when we're little kids, we love to DJ.
Mm.
And in Miami, there was a public access radio station. And when I was 12, I went there and I put together a tape. My voice hadn't even changed. And they were like, "We like this little kid. He's got chutzpah. Okay, let's put him on." So I started DJing, and there was a roller skating rink right around the corner of my house, right around the corner from my house,
Mhm.
and I started working there as a DJ.
Nice.
Um,
At
and
12?
then at 12,
Wow.
and this is one thing that's so true. Um, my dad. It's funny because only immigrants will get this,
Yeah.
because Americans will not get this. So my father, I say to him, "Dad, I want to go to work at the skating rink." He said, "Well, you're going to keep going to school?" I'm like, "Yeah." That's not even a question Americans would ask, but yeah,
Yep.
you know. So I said, "Yeah," and he says, "Okay, man that works, man that pays rent." I'm
Mm.
like, "What's rent, Dad?" He said, "You're going to learn." He said, $50 a week. I said, $50 a week? Yeah, but Dad, I only make 65. He said, "Work harder." You know,
Uh.
and and there are many more layers to that relationship. I mean, and they're obviously not something to go into here,
Mhm.
because my parents had my dad especially had a great deal of trouble with the blindness. So,
Mm.
and my parents, there's two approaches that were capable, they could have done, in
Mm.
my opinion. And I'm a dad, so I can judge. you know, and when I say that to my parents, I tell them, "I love you so much.
Mm.
but we're not gonna let's not, as Cubans say, let's not cover the sky with our finger.
Yeah.
We're gonna, or we're gonna tell the truth and shame the devil, right? And that is that there was only two paths to go by. You either held me in a cage and clipped my wings and never allowed me to fly, or you let me run and do whatever the hell I pleased.
Mm.
That's what I did. You know, I grew up. I started going to clubs.
Mm.
They thought it was amazing that the blind guy could put two records on a turntable and put the needle on it and match the beats and you know and and match the records. So adult clubs started calling me to go play there.
Mm.
And because I was blind, I could go there under this thing called the Performers Act,
Mm.
kind of like a circus thing.
Mm.
And I mean, I'm being tongue in cheek, but that really is kind of, wow, look at the blind, look at the amazing blind kid, you know.
Yeah.
So I got into Miami I started DJing in 1979.
How old were you at that time?
Yeah, I was 12.
Oh, still
Um,
12. So you were
yeah,
DJing like in clubs?
I started DJing I started DJing in adult clubs by the time I was 13, 14.
Oh,
So it was
wow.
80, 81. Started doing the things you do, smoking weed, doing coke, all the
Yeah.
stuff that you did back in the
Mhm.
80s.
In Miami, you still do today, I'm sure people do it.
Oh,
Especially in the
no,
80s. Well, yeah,
no,
80s,
Miami.
never mind. I
Miami's
take
gotten
it
so
back. I
much
take it
better.
back. 80s, I'm sure were a whole different game.
Yeah.
I only watched movies, okay? I
And
was born in 86, right in the middle.
I tell people about the movies, right?
Yeah.
That they were true and they were
Mm.
probably watered down. Everything you saw in Miami Vice, Tony
Well,
Montana, absolutely true. Not necessarily a real person, but a real persona, if that makes
yeah,
sense.
that's
I
crazy.
knew a lot of people like that. Grew up a
Mm.
lot. And unfortunately, those were the people that believed in me.
Mm.
Those were the people that believed in my mind for logistics. Those were the people that believed in my ability to talk to people. Those were
Mhm.
the people, and then and the music people.
Mhm.
I wrote an article once, and I said, the music industry and the dope business were the two places that I made it because it was all about what you brought to the party. And if what you brought to the party sucked, get the hell out of here.
Mhm.
And that's what it was like. you
Yeah.
know so I started DJing. I started hustling on the side and doing what I could, this
Mhm.
little that, you know and that $50 wasn't a problem anymore. Not that it
Yeah.
ever was. I mean, it
Uh-huh.
wasn't that was not why I did what I did. It was
Mhm.
not like, oh, his parents pushed him into being a doper. No, I was just stupid. I was a kid.
You were a
I was a
kid,
kid
yeah.
I was
Yeah.
a kid without boundaries, and I do not blame my parents at all. They're
Mm.
trying to raise. I got two other siblings. My
Mhm.
parents are blue collar workers, both of them. God bless them.
Mm.
My mother was a waitress and server. My dad's a carpenter, or was a carpenter. They're older now. They're retired.
Mhm.
But you know what I'm saying? So
Yeah, yeah,
you can't, man. You can't be pissed off and go to therapy. Oh my God, my parents. No,
yeah.
my
Yeah,
parents
they
did
did
what
the best they could with what
that's
they
that
had at
with
that
what they
time.
had. There you
That's
go.
it. Yeah, yeah.
They can't give what they don't have.
Mhm.
And my dad, the couple of times he showed up at school to
Mhm.
advocate for me, he didn't know the language very well, but he knew the street language real well. So a whole bunch of F bombs. I used to tell people it's like a rated R Ricky Ricardo. Um, but so it was not very long before I, just didn't ask my parents to advocate for me anymore. It was
Mm.
embarrassing. It was frustrating. And then, of course, going to school and being told, you need to work hard to get this diploma. And I had to work my ass off in school because all I got was a tape recorder and a braille writer.
Yeah. Yeah.
And my books, they had to be ordered a year in advance so somebody could either record them or put them in braille.
Mhm.
Um, I was the only blind kid that most teachers had because I was fully mainstreamed at the time.
Mhm.
I had what they called an itinerant teacher who came to visit a couple times a week.
Mhm.
Um, and the one I got a group of them. Some of them really cared about what they did. Others didn't give a damn.
Mhm.
Others were
Mhm.
just, they were just going to see another kid. You know,
Mhm.
and of course, I've got everybody telling me, "Well, you need to work hard. You need to get a diploma so you can make some money." I'm like, dude, I'm making more money than the principal. What's wrong with you? You know. Um, so needless to say, it was very, and I was very popular. I never got bullied. I was, it's funny because later, as my dad started hearing about my things as a kid and stuff like that, he was like, "Oh, because you were led." I'm like, "No, bro, no,
Mm.
no, I was the leader." I was the leader. I was the guy. I've always been a leader, Elena. Always.
Mhm.
You know, and when I was a little kid, it was funny because they would say, "So, Mikey, what do you want to be when you grow up?" And I'd say, "Well, I want to be a teacher."
Mm.
A teacher? What, like with a classroom? Like, no, I don't know, but I want to teach people about themselves. And I mean that. dead serious. I had no idea what the hell I was saying,
Mhm.
but that's what I said. And I think that I'm an old guy now, or I'm an older guy, and for years I was angry. I was
Mhm.
really angry because it's not fair, man. It's not.
Mhm.
But it's not fair. And $6, remember when it used to be a quarter, will get me a coffee,
Yeah.
you know? So it's not fair. It doesn't make it anymore.
Yeah.
It's not fair. No, it's not. But you know what I learned as a dad? You know what I learned as a husband? You know what I learned as an entrepreneur? You know what I learned as the one job as an employee that I got where
Mm.
they told me they didn't know what to do with you people? That life isn't
Mm.
fair.
Mm.
So what's
Mhm.
your version of your life not being fair? Don't make it an excuse. I got plenty of excuses to sit on my butt at home,
Yeah.
collect a check, and eat government cheese all day long, and nobody will ever say anything. In fact, it's the irony is, like I said, I have 5 kids. Um, so wife number two,
Mm.
um, we have 3 kids together.
Mhm.
And they would come to her and they'd say, "Oh, you got 4 kids."
Mm.
She'd be like, "No, I don't work."
Yeah.
No, I take care of the kids, and he's the one who brings home the money.
Yep.
And you know what I'm saying? So it's really pick your poison. But
Mhm.
life isn't fair. Life
Mhm.
isn't meant to be fair. Life is meant to be life, man. I mean,
Mhm.
and the and if I mean, listen, I'm certainly not making jokes about people who commit suicide or anything like that. I mean, that is terrible. And
Mhm.
and if you feel that way, you need to reach out to somebody. And I get
Mhm.
that. But you know what? Life sucks sometimes, but how many of
Mhm.
us want to throw it away? I'm
Mhm.
not going to run out and throw myself out in front of a bus tomorrow.
Mhm.
I'm going to go out and live it. And you know what? If today was a crappy day, well, I'm going to go to sleep, close my eyes, wake up tomorrow, and it'll be better. And if tomorrow's another crappy day, well, I'm going to pray and believe that the day after is going to be better because sooner or later, it gets
Mhm.
better,
Yep. Sure does.
and
Mhm.
because humans are very adaptable, right?
Yep.
So move forward, started working started DJing, um, opened up a mobile DJing thing with my friends, created a bunch of stuff, opened up a recording studio when I was 18, started doing a bunch of Miami bass records and stuff like that, the
Mm.
Miami bass stuff,
Mhm.
and grew up in that era, with the boom, 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 boom.
That's very
Um,
cool. Oh
and
gosh.
all the Two Live Crew and all that stuff. Luke was a good
Yeah.
friend of mine. In fact, we brought Two Live Crew. I was the booking engineer that brought the booking not engineer, the booking agent that brought Two Live Crew to Club Illusions in Hialeah, Miami. I think it was in 1986, 85, right around when you were born.
Yep.
Um, what do you call it? And brought them, and they had done a record called Beatbox, and they met Luke, and we used to bring in artists and share the cost with Luke because he had a skating rink, the Superstar Roller Tag, and down in Miami, and he and we brought these guys down, and they created Two Live Crew, but
Mm.
then in when I turned 21, um, I got my girlfriend pregnant. We were engaged. It
Mhm.
was it, and we had an oopsie, and and it was like, okay, well, babe, we're gonna have to bring the wedding up a year early. So we did that. And being
Yeah.
21, it was difficult. And that
Mhm.
was when I went and I got good. Thank God, I never dealt with addiction. Did a lot
Mhm.
of drugs and stuff when I was a kid, and my approach with my kids, they say, well, what do you do with your kids? You know, my approach to life is own your stuff. And I don't say it quite that cleanly.
Mhm.
You want to bleep it out?
It's okay, you could say it.
No, I just tell people own your shit and don't be a dick.
Yeah.
Those are and that is
Solid advice.
street knowledge. I've told my kids, listen, if you want to do drugs, when I was a kid, I did drugs because I didn't know what they were and because somebody said it
Mhm.
felt good or whatever. You got Google now, dude. Go look and see how many of the people you respect
Mhm.
do
Mhm.
that and where it ends up because you can see it now. You know
Mhm.
what? My kids don't do drugs. Everybody can smoke a little weed here and there, but that's not, you know,
Yeah.
that's not what I mean.
Yeah.
You know, um, I don't have an addictive personality, thank God.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, I lost a lot of friends along the way.
Mm.
My friends from when I was young are either dead, in the graveyard, in jail,
Mhm.
or they got saved in church. There's no
Mhm.
other way out of where I was,
Mhm.
you know. And for me, later I got very involved in the church,
Mhm.
and that was a turning point for me. I do not run in those circles these days. First and foremost, because of the political beliefs in that group,
Mhm.
but also just because I think that I've kind of evolved into a different place spiritually than that. But let
Mhm.
me tell you something. There's no doubt that that is where, in 1995, for me, I found myself at a place in my life where I needed to change because I
Mhm.
knew that life was worth more than I was making of it.
Mm.
You know, I had when I turned 21 and my son was coming along, I
Mhm.
went and I got a job doing collections at a bank. It was hilarious. I had hair down to here, like to my shoulders, big 80s vibe, big
Yeah.
puffy hair. I had a like a perm, and 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 I'm like, hey, I'm here to do collections. So 3 months into it, I'm like, well, when am I gonna be the president of this bitch? you
Yeah.
know? And they were like, well, we don't know what to do with you people.
Mm.
What do you mean us people? This is before ADA. What
Yeah.
do you mean us people? Well, we don't know what to do with you people. Somebody trained you to do our entry level job,
Mm.
which paid a whopping 13.5 a year
Mhm.
at the time. And we don't know what you're capable of. We don't know, even if we knew what you were capable of, we don't know how to teach you how to use our other systems. In other words, they didn't have a career path. Those that are listening to me speak, from your podcast audience that are in HR know that it is so vitally important to develop career paths for people,
Yeah.
because without a career path, you're going to be stuck doing entry level all your life.
Mhm.
And if you don't provide career paths, then you're going to have really terrible churn
Mhm.
of entry level employees because they're going to realize that it's a dead end job. How many people have a dead end job?
Mm.
So
Yeah.
career paths are so vitally important. And to me, they didn't know what to do with me. But they did do one thing. I
Mm.
said, I said, well, if you don't know what to do with me, I called the only one of the only mentors that really cared about me in my life at the time. That was a straight laced person, a guy
Mhm.
named Greg Luther from the Division of Blind Services in
Mhm.
Florida. And I said, Greg, this is what happened. And I was almost in tears. I was like, dude, I don't know what to do, man. I don't want to go back to, doing what I was doing. I'm just thinking my kid's sitting in school. What is your dad? Oh, my daddy's a drug dealer,
Mhm.
or he stays in the studio for 3 days, getting wasted, doing Miami bass music. It's like, no, I don't want to do that, man. I want to be a dad. I want to be
Yeah.
a husband. I want to be a respectable person, you know,
Yeah.
but no, it wasn't like that. Um, so he said, listen, Calvo, he said, let me tell you something. Behind that keyboard, you are an equal.
Mhm.
He said, you're gonna if you learn that computer, and he said, you're gonna take to it like a duck to water. Greg was like from Iowa. So ducks took to water in Iowa a lot. Um, and he mentored me and he taught me.
Mm.
And if I wasn't gonna be they had and this is again pre-ADA. So HR people, don't cringe too bad. We had a normal employee productivity rate and a blind
Oh,
employee
no.
productivity rate. I shit you not. I kid you
I'm
not. I
shaking my
kid you
head.
not.
Oh, no. Ugh.
So so it was like, okay, yeah. Well, then I'm going to raise the blind productivity rate.
Mm,
And the normal employee productivity rate was like, I don't know, 14 calls an hour doing collections at entry level at,
mhm,
less than 30 days.
mhm,
I raised, and the blindness productivity rate was like half that blind employee productivity rate. In other words, my productivity rate.
mhm.
I brought it up to 30 calls per hour per blind employee.
Wow.
Made employee of the month, of course. And they said, wow, we want another one.
Mm,
So they brought this other blind dude in and they're like, here, train him. I'm like, what? Train him? I'm gonna drop out of high school, man. And by the way, rewind. I dropped out of high school just real quick, um,
yeah.
because they weren't able to get my books on time in my 12th grade year. And
Mm,
and when you have a disability at that time in Dade County schools, and I don't know if it's the same thing now, but they could keep you till you're 21 because you're not an adult at that point until then.
uh-huh.
And that has to do with people that have, that are on the spectrum and things like that,
Mhm,
which they require a little bit more schooling. So they raise the school age, but they do it across the board for all disabilities, for what they used to call
mhm.
special ed.
Yeah.
So because some very smart thinking person didn't get my books for me in 11th grade, when
Mhm,
12th grade rolled around, I didn't have my books
mm,
in Braille. So I was expected to be an advocate and hire readers and all this other with Cuban parents that don't
mm,
speak the language and get my parents to help me and all this stuff. So yeah, good luck with that. So um so that year there was all of these, they were going to hold me back naturally.
mhm,
Well, you couldn't put me back in 12th grade because the year after that, there was going to be all of the 3 years of this and 3 years of that to graduate. So they
mhm.
thought they'd be smart and put me back in 10th grade. I was like, oh, hell no.
No, no.
So I left. So
Yeah.
anyway, fast forward. So back to the bank. So I raised the productivity rate. They hired another blind guy. I trained him. They hired another blind guy. I trained him. And Greg was like, "You got a knack for this."
Mhm,
Like, well, yeah, I guess. And he said, "Listen, I got another blind guy going out to Ryder trucks, and they want to know how blind people." I was almost like you people. How blind people use the computer and how they do this stuff. And
uh-huh.
you're not afraid to talk in front of a group of people, are you? I'm like, nah, I'm good. I'm Mikey C. I did that for years. So I'll never forget the first time I walked into this meeting with all these very straight-laced people from Ryder trucks, you know. And I'm like, "Hey everybody, my name's Mike Calvo. I'm here to talk to you about how a person with a visual impairment or how a blind person does a job in customer service. I actually
Mm,
work at, and I won't say the name of the bank, and they lent me to you for today so I could tell you about it." I said, "But before we get into it," I
mm.
said, "I'm dressed pretty sharp today, huh?" Everybody laughed. I said, "I bet you guys are saying, how did he do that?" I said, "Well, like any good guy, my wife dressed me this morning." I said, she said, "Mikey, put this on and put that on because that looks ridiculous or whatever." I mean, how many guys here can relate? And all the guys are like, yeah, yeah. So, you know, but and that's how you get people. I
Mhm,
realized, I realized in talking to that group of people, I love it. I love helping people. I love helping people understand. There's no stupid questions, people. There
mhm,
really
mhm.
aren't. If somebody gets offended by your questions, that's their freaking problem, not yours.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? If I got a problem with
Mhm,
you asking me about my blindness, visual impairment, why don't your eyes work? What? That's my problem. It's not you. It's
mhm.
me.
Yeah.
But by the way, I am not an advocate. I am not a representative of the entire blind community. Just because I was a jerk to you maybe one day doesn't mean all of us are jerks.
Mhm.
you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah,
So
in
don't
fact.
so it was so, I worked I the guy from Ryder Trucks got the job
Mhm.
because of my presentation. I showed him how to hook up to the mainframe and all that stuff. And I started working with the state of Florida. I was at a whopping 13.5 a year. So the state of Florida offered me $75 a day to
Nice.
go and do this for them, to do the blind training thing.
Mhm.
And I started working with Greg, and we put hundreds of blind people to work over the next few years. But what we would do
Mm.
is we would go in and we went into Pizza Hut, we went to Alamo Rent a Car, we
Mhm.
went to Sunbank, we went to SunTrust, we went to FedEx, we got Amex, all of these top companies.
Mhm.
And I would go in and I would start at the entry level and I would work my way up into middle management,
Mhm.
just not working, but learning the job
Right.
and making sure that the aspects of the job, it was called rehab engineering, job engineering.
Mhm.
And I would go in and I would define what the job roles were. Ironically enough, and it never ceased to amaze me, I couldn't get the damn jobs. But hey, I was working for those few people that got through.
Oh
You know,
gosh.
and
Yeah.
I sat in front of more managers and more supervisors than I could tell you and say, "Hey, would you like to hire people with disabilities that are pre-qualified, people that, a person with a disability is more dedicated to their job. We are more thankful for it. We're less apt to steal. We're less
Mhm.
apt to do wrong because we understand the value and the trust that you're placing in us
Mm.
as employees, as stewards." That's when I
Yeah.
learned the word stewardship, you know, and of our jobs. And got a lot of blind people jobs,
Mm.
and all this time, working and making babies and all that stuff. And like I said, until that fateful day in 95 came around and I became a Christian.
Mhm.
I didn't know what to do at that point because at around 93,
Mhm.
93 or so, the funding dropped out of the out of rehab, out of voc rehab, because of some stuff that the Clinton administration had done at the time and all that with when it
Mm.
came to VR. So what did Mikey do? Well, Mikey went back to the streets and back to the studio, you know,
Mm.
and did some work there um and anyway, and it ended up costing me my marriage. It ended up costing me a lot.
Mm.
Um and kind of floundered around until 1999 when I started a company on the internet. I saw this internet and I was like, wow, you mean I can hustle from home? you
Yeah.
know, I don't have to go out and pound the pavement anymore and hustle. I can hustle from home. And I didn't mean in a bad way. I just been, wow, let me see. And I started, I put a product out and it worked out really well. It got, it was called the Radio Webcaster. It got accolades from CNN as a product for the new millennium, blah, blah, blah. It was a product that would take audio from your computer and transmit it to an FM radio, and you can listen to online radio stations anywhere in your house.
Oh, very
Um,
cool.
yeah, it was neat. But you know what was cool, Elena? A lot of blind people started buying it.
Mm.
A lot of blind people, and I realized, oh my God, blind people have money
Mhm.
because I had never. And this is really where the whole thing for me comes from. Growing up, I mean, I try and make it as lighthearted, but it was tough as I
Mhm.
can. It was challenging. I hate to say it as raw and as crude, but I've stood in front of and behind more guns than I care to talk about
Mm.
as a blind person. There
Mhm.
was a time as a blind person where I used to drive around. Well, I didn't drive around.
Mm.
I did drive once. You can see about that on my website. But where a Mac 10 was part of what was sitting in the trunk of my car.
Mhm.
And that was just the day it was. That was the time it was.
Mhm.
You
Mhm.
know, and I said, I don't want to be that person. I don't want to be that person. I've got something to contribute to society.
Mhm.
I've got something to teach people. And that is that, what? You can do it. You can do it. There's no excuse for not doing it.
Mhm.
You know, there's a reason for not making it, and therein lies the difference, right? Let's
Mhm.
separate the difference between an excuse and a reason.
Yeah.
You know, I cannot fly a plane, you know, I
Mhm.
mean, for the reasons that are pretty obvious. That is not
Mhm.
an excuse.
Yeah.
So if somebody said, "Hey, Calvo, you should go to flying school and learn how to fly for Delta because they've got a bunch of
Mm.
airline things coming up," I'm like, "Well, no, I can't." No, you're making excuses. No, no, there's a pretty valid reason for it,
Yeah.
you know. But now for them to say, "Hey, you should do this or do that," where I can go out and I can get an education or whatever, there are reasons. And then for me not to do it is an excuse. Now,
Mhm.
why did I become an entrepreneur? Well, first of all, I believe that I have something to contribute to the world.
Mhm.
And the other thing is because I believe very strongly that it's hard as hell for a blind person to get a job.
Yeah.
And I would rather spend my time trying to change the world and make it a better place than be frustrated with the world and what it has to offer.
Mm. And
So I'm
let me
sorry. So
ask.
this is see what you started just by asking one question. See,
I
it's all
love
your fault.
it. Well, you've covered everything I wanted to ask you, but I do still have a couple more questions for you. Particularly, I'm curious, like, because and I don't know what the numbers are in terms of like how many blind people or like young people in the US, and like what type of services are now available to them, but I'm sure like mentorship from somebody like you is probably super beneficial to these young people. So do you do any work with young people at the moment? Do you
I
kind of
do.
what advice do you give them? Like what are some things you share with them to help them navigate the challenges of blindness?
Yeah, I do. And that's huge because that's the one thing I didn't have. I had negative mentorship.
Yeah.
I had Vinny and I had the other guy. They were telling me
Yeah.
what to do, and
Mhm.
how to do it. You know, that's not the kind of mentorship you want. I didn't meet other blind people, like I said, till
Mhm.
till almost 2000.
Yeah.
And at that point, I was 29. No,
Wow.
yeah. Wait, no, wait.
I can't do math, so don't
31.
ask me.
I was like
31.
31
Okay.
when I started meeting blind people.
Wow.
And realizing that there was a blind community out there. The internet has really helped us communicate and mentor.
Yeah.
I do regular mentoring sessions with different groups across the internet on Zoom,
Mhm.
and the National Federation of the Blind, which is a great blindness organization, but they can't
Mhm.
do everything. The
Right.
internet has helped the organization do a lot, and the American Council of the Blind is another great organization. The NFB and the ACB are kind of like the Republicans and the Democrats. Two different mindsets, both at the same goal. We want to make the lives of blind people better.
Mm.
They just both have different ideologies and ways of doing it. You know,
Mm.
and if you want to read more, then go to their web pages, and see what the differences are, and whatever your flavor is, please contribute because
Yeah.
they could use the contributions, both groups,
Mhm.
because what they're doing is they're doing great work. They are raising the future. Blindness, of course, by its sheer nature, is something that happens to a lot of older people.
Mhm.
So a majority of blind people are older,
Mhm.
but there are a pretty good amount of Gen Z and millennial blind people
Mhm.
that grew up with the internet, grew up having a lot more online socialization, a lot more of a blind click,
Mhm.
and my goal has always been to bring that blind click into the mainstream. It's
Mhm.
always been to help sighted people and blind people find common ground,
Mhm.
and to be candid with blind people.
Mhm.
When you go into a job interview, you can't be dressed like a slob. You can't be talking to somebody and looking up in the sky like this and talking to them. You got to look at them in the face. You
Yeah.
can't be sitting there rocking in your chair, when you're talking to somebody.
Mhm.
There are things that and there are things and by the way, people say, well, why do blind people do that? Because it's stimulation.
Mm.
It's
Yeah.
if I'm rocking this way, remember, if your eyes are closed, you got nothing to distract you. So if I'm rocking, at least I
Yeah.
got something stimulating my mind. I spend a lot of time in my head.
Yeah.
So, I need external things to, and looking someone in the face, unless you've got someone like my dad who used to tap me on the top of the head, look down,
Uh-huh.
look at me, or tap me on the chin, look at me when I would do that, when I do the
Yeah.
blindy things, you know, unless you've got somebody, you look weird,
Hmm.
and
What
you
a
may,
mhm.
and that's something that people don't ask. Why are blind people like that? You
Yeah.
know.
What are some other things that you wish people knew, or similar things like that that you wish people knew or had the courage to ask, and stuff like that around blindness?
Oh my goodness. How do we get dressed? How do I organize my clothes? How do I change a baby?
Yeah. How do
You
you do
know,
that? How do you change a baby?
how do you change a baby?
I don't change any babies. I don't
Yeah,
know.
but you know what I mean. I mean,
Yeah, yeah,
very
yeah. I know.
carefully, very carefully.
Very
I mean,
quickly.
babies are freaking wiggly little critters, man. I mean,
Yeah.
I got 5 of them. Well,
Yeah.
I just put my last one into college last week.
Oh, congrats.
Yeah. So my peanut, she's 18 and she's
Wow.
beautiful. But yeah, I mean, um, how do I get places? How do I remember things? How do I
Mm-hmm.
take notes? How do I organize things? How do I count my money? You
Mm.
know, how do I get transportation? Uber. Before Uber, there were taxis. Before that, blind people, we learned the public transportation. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I love New York City. New York City was great, man. It was like a grid. I remember I took somebody to New York one time, and I was walking around with her, and I'm like, "Here, I know my way around here." And it's just like, "How do you do that?" I'm like, "Because
Mm.
it's a square."
Yeah,
It's a
true.
it's a grid, man. I know how how to get around a grid as long as you remember where you're at.
Yeah.
You know,
Are there a lot of like tools that you use for that? Like I know for the computer, for before we start recording, you mentioned you use like a
a screen
tool. What
reader.
is a screen reader? That's what it's called. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. And
Um.
there are screen readers available on your phone,
Mm-hmm.
on Android and iOS, and on
Mm-hmm.
the Mac and on Windows. They're all
Mm-hmm.
part of the computer.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I use, oh goodness, I use a bunch of stuff. I use
Yeah.
Echoes, like Amazon Echoes to remind me of things.
Mm-hmm.
I love to barbecue. I love to grill,
Mm-hmm.
and smoke meats and stuff. You can look me up, hashtag BBQing blind, BBQing blind on TikTok.
Oh, nice.
Um, but you know, it is. I love barbecuing. Um, I love cooking, and there are tools, talking thermometers and things like that. And a
Yeah.
lot of these things are smart devices now. So again, the technology has really helped me do things, even produce music. When I was younger,
Mm.
and when I first started producing music, I used to have to tell an engineer what I wanted and all that stuff. And now I've just got a computer right here, man. I do my own music. I still do music today.
Yeah.
Not Miami bass anymore, but just different stuff now. Now I do drum and bass and a bunch of other stuff.
Yeah.
But so
Mm.
technology, and just um, again, I've been doing this a long time.
Mm-hmm.
um, but there are so many of us as blind folks online, and I'll be
Mm.
happy to give you, for the show notes or whatever, I'll be happy to give you some YouTube channels where you can see blind people living living blindfully, living a fully blind life.
Mm.
You
Yeah, I'd love
know,
to check that out. That'll be super educational, I think.
yeah, I
Yeah.
I do too, because we're a lot more similar than you think.
Yeah,
You know what I'm
of
saying? I mean,
course. We're all people at the end of the day. You just
yeah, but
navigate, yeah, you navigate life in your own way. And you know what I mean? Everybody navigates life in their own way, and you just have your way, and other people have their way potentially. That's how I kind of view it, I guess.
no, you're right. You're
Mm.
right. But some folks, we're not going to break. And
Yeah.
I love the inclusive world we live in. Right.
Mhm. Mhm.
I think inclusivity is so important,
Mhm.
but there's a point of inclusivity where people lose their identity. I think,
Yeah.
where we're so afraid that because I'm an individual in this way, and I'm not saying that you're not a member of a group. You
Mm.
know, I mean, I identify as, whatever pronouns. Pronouns is not something I grew up with.
Huh.
It took me a long time to figure that out.
I'm
Um,
still figuring it out.
my kids laugh at me, but but the other thing is that people are so easily offended today,
Oh, yes.
and I'm not offended.
Mm.
You can ask me, how do you wipe your butt, dude? And
Yeah.
I'll tell you, I use a little hose. You know, I use
Yeah.
paper like everybody else, but I got a little hose and I
Mhm.
put water on my butt. There
The
you go. There,
bidet.
use that as use that as a that's right. That's what they're called.
Yeah.
You use that as the podcast promoter.
That's the clip that's gonna go. That's the clip that's gonna capture attention.
You betcha. But no, I mean, seriously. I mean, that is, I mean, to me, I I love sharing my story. I'm an
Mm.
old guy now, older, and
Older. You're not old. You're still
no, no, no,
young.
no, old.
Older.
I
Older and
I
wiser.
I take great pleasure in my age. I'm one of the only people that I knew growing up that made it to this age, unfortunately, because I didn't grow up in
Yeah.
a good group of people.
Mhm.
You know, I should be dead or in jail.
Mm.
You know, instead, I'm talking to wonderful people like you and saying, you know what? Yes, we can.
Mhm.
Yes, we can. And we're going to make it. We're going to make it
Mm.
because I believe in this. I believe in people. I believe in that we're building a more inclusive society. I believe that if we can dialogue with people, HR folks, um, the little interaction I've had with HR folks, you know, they're told you need to check the boxes. You need to make sure we're compliant. You need to make sure.
Mhm.
Yes, you do. But also, accommodations, when you go to a hotel,
Mhm.
right, for accommodations, they ask you, what can we do for you?
Mhm.
That's an accommodation. They're
Yeah.
not checking off a box. They're
Yeah.
asking you. They're going, "Oh, I see you're arriving late. Would you like us to have a bottle of water waiting for you in your room? Would you like us to,
Mhm.
pre-order dinner for you or whatever?" It's an accommodation.
Mhm.
Accommodations aren't just something that you do because you're checking off a box. Accommodations mean productivity.
Mhm.
Productivity means success. And success means more money for shareholders. It means more ability to hire people, and it means a better community.
Mhm.
And we want to be a part of that community. We have the
Yeah.
right to be a part of that community, but more importantly, we want to be a part of that community. We want to be a part of the answer. We want to be a part of the solution to whatever company, whatever problem, whatever situation your organization is trying to fill. We as people with disabilities want to be, part of that answer. And when
Mhm.
it comes to us as a community, we have a saying in my community. It says nothing about us without us. In other
Mhm.
words,
Mhm.
listen, I know there's a lot of people out there that look at a blind person and say, "Man, I got a great idea. I'm going to do this for blind people and I'm going to do
Mhm.
that for blind people." And then they go and they spend a lot of money or whatever and they put their
Mhm.
product out there and they bring it and blind people don't want it. And my
Mhm.
first
Mhm.
question to them is, "Well, how many blind people did you ask?"
Yeah, exactly.
So nothing about us without us. If you have a major company, if you have a Fortune 500 company or a large company, a large enterprise that doesn't have an accessibility group, create one.
Mm.
Because accessibility, my money is as green as anybody else's, or whatever.
Yeah.
Now it's not green anymore, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, the money's green, but whoever sees money anymore.
Yeah.
Isn't it funny? They take your license. If you pay somewhere with $100, they take your ID. Um, you can pay on your credit card $100 all day. Um, but
Interesting.
uh,
Mm.
but yeah. So to me, it's like accessibility is something that's so vitally important for a company to practice.
Yeah.
But if we don't dialogue, if we don't get to know each other as people first, and I don't mean people first language, I mean as people,
Yeah.
as humans first. You know, I'm not a, I'm not a person with blindness. I'm a blind person.
Mhm.
I'm a blind guy. My blindness doesn't identify me.
Mhm.
It doesn't define me, I guess.
Yeah.
but it is part of who I am.
Yeah.
And don't worry about it. Don't worry about how you talk about me. You
Yeah.
know, let's cut the language and let's figure out how we can make each other's lives better. Let's figure out how we can, make this world better for our kids. You
Mm.
know, I don't have any grandkids yet, thank God. My brother does. I call
I'm
him an
sure
old guy.
soon.
No, stop. Bite your tongue. Um, and if they do, they're gonna call me Mikey, or maybe they'll call me Uncle Mikey. But yeah, but no, seriously. I mean,
Mm.
I really love what I do. I love talking to groups of people. I love sharing, and I love getting, dialoguing with people. I've got a
Mhm.
lot to say, but I still got a lot to learn.
Mm.
And I want to learn. So, you know, teach me.
Yeah. It's a beautiful way to wrap up this conversation. I love the message that hopefully the audience is kind of leaving with. Where can people find you if somebody wants to get in touch with you or learn more about you? Where do you hang out at the most?
I am Mike Calvo everywhere.
All right.
MikeCalvo.com is my website. Pneuma Solutions, Pneuma Solutions.com is my company, and we provide accessible cloud solutions, enterprise level cloud solutions for blind people. And it's funny because we tell people we spell pneuma with a P to make blind people mad because you can't see it unless you spell it out.
Yeah.
So, but it's pneumasolutions.com. Of course, like I said before, BBQing blind on TikTok, and I'm on Facebook and on Mastodon.
Mm.
Don't do the X thing. I'm there, but I rarely post there. Um, and that's about it. I mean, but please do. I love talking to organizations.
Mhm.
I've been speaking for a good minute. Love doing keynotes, love doing, diversity training, getting in front of a group of executives and really helping them understand and
Mhm.
cutting through the BS. That's
Mhm.
so important that we can just dialogue.
Yeah.
So I do talks, I do seminars, check it out.
Yeah. Last question I ask all of my guests. What is one question you wish people would ask themselves more often?
Ask themselves,
Yeah, more often.
is the reason I'm not doing this an excuse? Is the I'm sorry.
Mhm.
um Is the why for me not doing this thing I'm thinking about a reason or an excuse?
Love it. Mike, thank you so much for your
Thank
time. You've
you,
definitely
Elena.
inspired me and educated me in many ways. And I look forward to sharing this episode with the audience and sharing any relevant links you think you can just send my way, and then I'll include it in the show notes. But I think it is all about dialogue and communication and education as well. We don't know what we don't know, and until we have these kind of conversations, like how else can we know? So I appreciate you being here. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.